At one end of the temple, Satan sits on an absurdly large throne, towering over the other demons as he addresses them. "Friends," he says, "I want to thank you for your support in these difficult times. Remember, the battle for heaven is like a roller coaster. We're down now, but surely we will rise back up again. Thank you also for recognizing in me certain leadership qualities that others may have missed. It may have been circumstances or my own ambition that first put me in charge, but it is your support that keeps me here. But let no one here envy my position. Rather, you should pity me. Being the ruler of hell only makes me more of a target for God's wrath." Satan continues, "Since none of you wants to take my place as leader, that makes us more unified than the angels of heaven, each of whom must long to take the throne of God for themselves. That, I believe, is our advantage, and that's why we will reclaim our kingdom. But how to do it? I'll open the floor for suggestions." Immediately, the bloodthirsty demon Moloch rises and addresses the crowd. "I say war. We hit them hard, we hit them fast, and we hit them now. I'm not one for pretty speeches, but every minute we spend here debating is a minute that delays our inevitable invasion. Every hour we spend plotting or scheming is another hour that we're here imprisoned in hell. So let's put some of that torture back on the torturers. If they want to keep us in a lake of fire, let's throw some of that fire back at them, and maybe even set the throne of God ablaze." Moloch goes on, "Why then do we hesitate from attacking heaven? There are just two things to be afraid of, either the journey out of hell or the outcome of the battle to follow. The journey is nothing. We are winged angels, and it is our nature to soar upward. As for the battle, what outcome could be worse than our present circumstances? If we lose, perhaps we will be destroyed, and that oblivion will be sweet compared to the tortures we have endured. Or perhaps we cannot be destroyed. If that is the case, we can rise and fight again and again, preventing heaven from ever knowing peace. And that, to be a pebble in the shoe of God, is its own form of revenge." Moloch sits down again. From another corner of the room, Belial, the lord of every vice, known as the most persuasive of all demons, rises gracefully and replies, "That was a very impressive speech. My colleague urges us back into battle when even he, the greatest soldier and tactician among us, cannot see a path to victory. He says we should fight anyway for the sake of revenge. What revenge? Heaven is patrolled by armed guards on the walls and scouts flying around the perimeter. We wouldn't even be able to get in." Belial continues, "Even if we're able to fight our way into heaven, God will repel our attack immediately, as he has done before. From that point, according to my distinguished friend, the best we can hope for is for us to be snuffed out and put out of our misery. My friends, I take issue with every aspect of this plan. First, who's to say we even can be destroyed? Up until now, every one of us seems to be immortal. Second, if God can destroy us, what makes you think he'll want to? His intention is to punish us, and if annihilation is what we want, surely that's the one thing he'll deny us. Finally, I don't believe we should even want to be destroyed. According to my colleague, we are already living in the worst of all possible worlds, and what happens to us next doesn't matter. I say it matters a great deal. Here we are engaged in a lively debate. Wouldn't you say we're better off now than when we were chained to the lake of fire? We sit comfortably in a temple of our own making. Isn't this an improvement over being chased through the chaos? Things could always be worse, even if you can't picture how. And if we provoke him, God will raise his red right hand once again in vengeance. to strike us down in ways we can't even begin to imagine. There can be no war against an omniscient being who can guard against every one of our plans before we can even enact it. I'm amazed that some of you can be so brave going into battle, yet so afraid of accepting the consequences of defeat. We lost, and this hell is our prison, and there's no getting around that. But maybe, if we don't provoke him, God will leave us alone. And in time, the flames will get smaller, and the fire will burn less hot, and we'll be able to make the most of things here. With that, Belial, the worthless one, well pleased with his own words, sits down. Now Mammon, with his bent neck and stooped back, rises and speaks to the crowd. It seems we have an impossible choice, he says. Do we go to war or ask for peace? To choose war is to choose certain defeat. We all know we cannot win against an all-powerful foe. But if we beg God's forgiveness and ask to be allowed to return to heaven, perhaps in his mercy God will grant this. And think what that will mean. Hour after hour spent in jubilant song, singing his praises, obeying his laws, serving him endlessly. No. Peace was never an option. I propose a third way. We can ignore heaven entirely, keep ourselves to ourselves, and focus on improving our lives here. Just as God sometimes dims the light of heaven by surrounding himself with dark clouds, we can brighten up hell with gleaming silver and gems pulled from the ground. Our glory will be all the greater because it will be earned through tireless labor, and in time, we can make hell its own sort of paradise. Mammon finishes his speech and sits down, and is met with a rush of applause, like the sound of wind roaring through rocks in a cove by the sea. The crowd approves of his plan, because they are afraid to go to war and face the thunderbolts of God and the sword of the angel Michael. Then Beelzebub, Satan's lieutenant, stands to give a retort. With a look of ruined majesty, battle-worn but still grand, and the crowd hushes down, like wind dying down in the noontime heat. Beelzebub says, "You're all so quick to give up your claims to heaven, and you dream of building a new empire here in hell, but you forget that God himself built this place to be our dungeon. And as far away as he may be, he still rules over us here. We've been debating war versus peace as if we have a free choice. But as prisoners, the only peace available to us is enslavement." Beelzebub continues, "We all thirst for revenge, and this thirst will not be quenched by making peace with God. And yet a direct assault on heaven is doomed to failure. There must be another way to attack. We do have reports that God was planning to create a new land called Earth, and populate it with a new species called humans, similar but inferior copies of us angels, and yet they are said to be God's new favorites. We should find out everything we can about these humans, investigate their strengths and weaknesses. They just might be the key to our revenge. This Earth is in the far reaches of God's kingdom. If we attack, we can destroy it in one fell swoop. Or if we can't destroy it, we can conquer it and drive the humans out. Or if we can't drive them out, we can convince them to turn away from God, so that in his grief and rage he will snuff out his own creation. Then, joining us in hell, the humans will curse the name of their creator and their first ancestor. What do you think? Is this a revenge worth attempting? Or should we stay here and keep dreaming of an empire we'll never build?" Beelzebub concludes triumphantly. Beside him, Satan, the true architect of the plan, gives a nod. They take a vote, and the demons are unanimously in favor of Beelzebub's proposal. After the votes are tallied, Beelzebub speaks up once more. "Well done," he says. "We will invade Earth. From there, we will be so much closer to reclaiming our homeland in heaven. The rays of heaven's light will burn off this gloom, and the air will be sweet like honeysuckle, instead of this sulfurous air we breathe now. But who will be first to make the journey to Earth? Whoever undertakes this expedition will need to be brave enough to survive the journey through chaos, and clever enough to outwit the guards of Earth." The crowd goes silent. No one wants to volunteer. No one is willing to make the escape alone. Finally, Satan himself speaks up. "You ask a lot, Beelzebub," he says. "Whoever is going to undertake this journey must make their way through 9 layers of fire that encircle us. Beyond the flames, there is the vast expanse of night to travel through. And beyond that, who knows what dangers await us when we arrive on Earth?" Satan continues, "What kind of ruler would I be if I let fear prevent me from carrying out the will of the people? I will accept the hazards as well as the honors of leadership. I will travel to Earth. You must all stay here and continue to build up and defend our city, while I make the journey alone." And with that, he stands and cuts off any further debate. This is a tactical move on Satan's part, for he knows that at this point, certain rivals who want his power might offer to make the journey with him. Knowing that he will refuse them, they will get the credit for their bravery without actually risking anything. As it stands, Satan keeps all the glory for himself. The crowd cheers on Satan's words, and their gloom is lifted to see the bravery of their leader. It's like on a rainy afternoon, when a single ray of sunshine bursts through the clouds, and birds begin to chirp thinking it's the start of a new day. And the demon's admiration is genuine, for even fallen angels retain some of their virtue. And now that their course is set, they are unified in their purpose. Among rational beings, only humans will let themselves become divided by petty disagreements, when we should be united against the evil of such beings as these. And so the great council of hell is dissolved. Satan is dressed in his full battle regalia, and surrounded by his lieutenants. The trumpeters blow their trumpets, and they are answered by a mighty cheer from all of the demons that echoes throughout the canyons and caverns of hell. And then everyone goes their separate ways, finding tasks and obligations to occupy them until the return of their leader from his voyage to Earth. The demons find various ways to occupy their time while they wait for Satan to return. Some take part in chariot races, others engage in mock war games. Still others take to their harps and sing songs about their own heroic deeds and the rebellion against heaven. These songs are biased, of course, and not entirely truthful, but like all songs sung by angelic beings, they are still beautiful to the ear. Another group of demons spends this time engaged in philosophical debate with one another, contemplating and arguing the nature of fate and free will and the choices that led them where they are now. They build entire labyrinths out of logic that ultimately lead nowhere, but their rhetoric is pleasing enough to ease the pain of the damned, and harden the minds of those who would not repent anyway. Yet another group spends this time exploring hell, searching for the sources of the 4 rivers that feed into the lake of fire. There is the Styx, the river of hatred; Acheron, the river of sorrow; Cocytus, the river of regret; and Phlegethon, the river of rage. All of hell is encircled by Lethe, the river of oblivion, whose waters cause anyone who drinks from them to forget pleasure and pain and even their own identity. On the far side of this river is a vast wasteland of snow and ice. From time to time, the demons attempt to escape the burning plain by ferrying across this river, after which they become frostbitten and nearly frozen through. so they ferry back across to thaw out. And this relentless crossing between extremes of cold and heat drives them mad, so much so that they attempt to drink from the river and forget themselves. But when they reach their hands down to cup the water and bring it to their lips, it evaporates before they can even drink. As they explore these regions of fire and of ice, the demons are pursued ceaselessly by dragons and monstrous animals. They can find no rest and no comfort. Meanwhile, Satan takes flight alone. He soars and swoops up and down and all around the coast, looking for the gate of hell to escape. Like a ship in the spice trade that sails through the Indian Ocean and around the Cape of Good Hope. Satan flies up and finally arrives at the entrance to hell. It is blocked by 9 gates and guarded by 2 unfamiliar figures. On one side there is a creature with the head and torso of a beautiful woman, but below the waist she has a scaly tail like a serpent. She is reclining, and a pack of wild dogs crawls all over her, yapping. As Satan approaches, they scatter and hide, but their barks can still be heard. On the other side, there is a creature whose features cannot be made out. It seems to be made of shadow, and it twists and changes and grows. Its only recognizable feature is a crown made of black shadow on its head. And as Satan approaches, it rushes toward him, its footsteps echoing and thundering throughout hell. Satan doesn't flinch as the beast approaches. He stands firm and calls out, "Who are you, and why are you standing in between me and those gates? I mean to pass through, and you'd better get out of my way or face the wrath of a heavenly spirit." The beast responds, "Aren't you the leader of the failed rebellion against God? You may be a heavenly spirit, but you're in hell now. I'm the king here. I'm your king. So get out of my sight and go back to your punishment, or you'll taste my poisoned dart." As it speaks, the shadowy hell beast seems to unfold itself and grow to 10 times its size, but Satan is undeterred. He continues in his path toward the gate like a comet. The two face off together, taking deadly aim at one another with dart and spear. It seems like the sky when 2 storm clouds meet, and the air pressure drops and the light grows dim. But just before the storm can break, the serpent woman who holds the key to the gate rushes between them. The serpent woman cries out, "Father, why are you trying to kill your only son?" To this, Satan replies, "Did you just call me father? And did you just call this beast my son? How can this be? I've never seen either of you detestable creatures before in my life." And the woman replies, "Do you truly forget so quickly? Or has my appearance so changed that you no longer recognize me? Don't you remember, when you were in heaven plotting your rebellion, a sudden migraine overtook you, and I sprung from the side of your head, fully grown, a beautiful woman armed with a spear. The other angels were amazed to see me, and they called me Sin. But you fell in love with me, as I reminded you so much of yourself, and you impregnated me. Meanwhile you fought and lost your rebellion, and as God imprisoned you, he set me here to guard the gate and hold the key. Before long, our son tore his own way out of my womb, causing me to become disfigured. Death, I cried in fear, and this became his name. And the caverns of hell echoed back the word, death. She concludes, "I fled, but death chased me down and raped me, impregnated me, and I gave birth to these howling dogs, who surround me constantly and gnaw on my innards. Now, without rest, I must sit facing my son, my enemy. He would gladly kill me, but he knows that it is foretold that my death will mean his own as well. But you should watch out. Take my warning. Even you, Satan. are not immune to his poison dart. Satan replies, "My dear daughter, I'm not here to hurt anyone. I've come to free you, to free all of us. I intend to pass through these gates alone. From there, I will brave the depths of chaos in search of the rumored land that God has created and populated with a new species to replace his lost angels. Once I know the lay of the land, I will return here for you and our son Death, and I will bring you to that place where you can breathe easy and where you will have your fill of souls to feast upon." Death grins, if a shadow can be said to grin, and Sin says, "The King of Heaven entrusted me with this key, and he set me and my son here to guard the gates of hell, and he forbade me from letting anyone pass through them. But why should I obey a God who would send me to hell? You are my father. I owe my allegiance to you. I will let you pass through, and when you find this new land, the three of us will rule it together, and I will sit at your right hand." Sin takes out her key and turns it in the lock. The gates to hell open with a screech, and once opened, they cannot be closed again. Smoke from hell rushes through the opening, and the air inside becomes clearer. Satan peers out into the chaos, and he sees a glassy black ocean with neither beginning nor end. Up ahead, as far as the eye can see, all of the substance of the universe is intermingled, wet and dry, cold and hot, churning in a constant state of upheaval. Satan pauses for a moment in the gateway and plots his course, for he knows this will be a long journey with no safe place to rest along the way, and he listens to the cacophonous sound of the storm that never ends. Satan takes flight like a bat out of hell. Finding an updraft caused by hot air escaping through the gate, he soars high and far, but eventually the air becomes too thin to support his wings, and he drops downward, ever downward, and he falls into the quicksand of chaos. He is nearly trapped, and it is humanity's misfortune that he is not. But with the power of his own rage, he uses his legs to kick, and his hands to climb, and his wings to propel himself forward, ever forward, until at last he hears the sound of voices in the distance. Satan changes course and follows the sound of the voices. Eventually, he comes across the court of King Chaos, lord of this kingdom that bears his name, and his queen, Night, along with all their hangers-on. Satan says, "Chaos and Night, please do not be alarmed. I was merely traveling to heaven and my way happened to pass through your lands. But if you can tell me where the border is, I will gladly be on my way. Or better yet, perhaps there is some portion of your lands that God has recently taken from you? If so, I will travel there instead. My intention is to reclaim those lands and return them to darkness. When I do, I will return them to you as a gift, in payment for the help you offer me now. I do not desire to keep them for myself. My only desire is revenge." King Chaos replies, "I know who you are, Satan. It wasn't long ago that I saw you chased through here by the army of God. I have to be watchful these days to stop God from taking even more of my empire. First, he took hell to serve as your prison. Now, he's taken more of my territory and used it to create a new land called Earth. You have to go through heaven to get there. The entrance is just a short ways that way. Now why don't you head over there and create a bit of chaos yourself?" Satan eagerly sets off in the direction he was pointed toward. Like a mythic Greek sailor, Jason or Odysseus, who navigated the treacherous waters, he deftly avoids all obstacles as he makes his way through the chaos. The way is difficult for Satan, but later on in our story, his children, Sin and Death, will follow, and they will build a bridge over the abyss, linking hell and our world. This is why today on Earth, there are so many evil spirits tempting humankind. Satan's pathway becomes easier and easier, and gradually the darkness gives way to a dull gray as the light from heaven penetrates the murk of chaos. At last, Satan can see the borders of heaven itself, its walls stretching out of sight in every direction. It's his old home. He also sees our universe hanging from a golden chain below heaven, like the pendulum of a grandfather clock. And as the hour of humanity's fall ticks closer, Satan approaches.